Look at a map of Antarctica. Not the stylized version. Not the bright blue textbook graphic. A real satellite map. Cold. White. Featureless at first glance. Then zoom in. Far off the western edge of the Antarctic Peninsula, scattered among broken shells of ice and rock, there's a small island most people have never heard of. Rothschild Island. It doesn't stand out. No major research stations. No famous expeditions centered around it. No viral photographs. Just another name in a place filled with names that feel distant and irrelevant. If you asked someone to point to it, they couldn't. If you asked why it matters, there's no immediate answer. And that's exactly why it's worth looking at. Because the places that don't demand attention are often the ones that never get questioned. Rothschild Island was named in 1904. The name came from a French expedition led by a man named Jean-Baptiste Charcot. Naval officer, physician, scientist, not a fringe figure, not an outsider. He was one of the most respected polar explorers of his time. His expeditions to Antarctica, particularly between 1903 and 1910, produced some of the earliest serious scientific data on the western Antarctic Peninsula. Meteorology, geography, biology. His work was meticulous, careful, documented, respected, and the funding for that expedition came from the Rothschild family. At first, that doesn't mean anything. In the early 20th century, wealthy patrons funded exploration all the time. It was the era before governments fully absorbed scientific expansion. Private money filled the gaps. Names were placed on mountains, islands, coastlines. Prestige, legacy, geography as a kind of branding. That's the normal explanation. And on its own, it works. But then you start reading the actual expedition records. Not summaries, not documentaries. The original documents. The published accounts, complete with scientific appendices, notes, measurements. The parts that don't get turned into narratives. And that's where something shifts. Because buried in those records, in between pages of weather data and coastal mapping, there's a sentence. Just one. Easy to miss. Charcot notes that certain coastal formations in the region showed morphological characteristics that didn't align with the glacial models of the time. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't speculate. He doesn't draw conclusions. He notes it and moves on. One sentence, then pages of normal data. That's it. No follow-up. No dedicated section. No later paper expanding on the observation. Just silence. Now, on its own, that doesn't mean much. Scientists encounter anomalies all the time. They log them, and sometimes they never return. Funding ends. Priorities shift. A single observation isn't always enough to justify deeper investigation. That's how science works. But the nature of what he noted matters. Because Charcot wasn't guessing. He wasn't writing impressions. He was a trained hydrographer. He understood coastal structure. He understood how glacial erosion shapes rock. And when he says something doesn't match the model, that's not casual. That's precise. It means the geometry of what he was looking at didn't behave the way it should have. And yet, no one followed up. Not immediately. Not decades later. Not even when Antarctic research expanded massively in the mid-20th century. The note remained unanswered. Now hold that in your mind, because we're going further back to 1513. An Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis creates a map. It's a compilation, drawn from multiple older sources. Standard practice for cartographers of the time. Nothing unusual there, until you look at the bottom of the map, the southern coastline. At first, it looks distorted, abstract. But in the 20th century, researchers started comparing that coastline to modern data. And one claim emerged, that the shape depicted on the map closely resembles the subglacial coastline of Antarctica. Not the ice-covered surface, the land underneath. That's a problem, because Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and the ice sheet that covers it today obscures the underlying land. You can't see that coastline without modern surveying techniques. Radar, seismic imaging, technology that didn't exist in 1513. Now, there are counter-arguments, strong ones, cartographic distortion, projection errors, the idea of terra australis, a hypothetical southern continent that early mapmakers believed had to exist to balance the northern landmasses. These explanations are valid. They deserve to be taken seriously. And many historians argue that the resemblance is coincidence, that the map is being interpreted to fit a conclusion. That's fair. But in 1960, something happened. Charles Hapgood, a researcher studying the map, presented his findings to a cartographic evaluation unit within the United States Air Force. Not theorists, not fringe analysts, technical specialists, people whose job was geographic precision. They analyzed the alignment, and they issued a written response, stating that they could not explain the accuracy of the coastline using known 16th century mapping methods. That statement exists. It was formal, and it was never officially retracted. Now again, that doesn't prove anything on its own. It raises a question. That's all. But now you have two things. A 16th century map that may depict Antarctic coastline beneath the ice, and a 20th century explorer who notes that the coastal formations in that same region don't behave as expected. And both of those things point to the same general area. The Western Antarctic Peninsula, the island chains, the band of territory that includes Rothschild Island. That could be coincidence. It could be. But then something else happens. Around the same time Charcot is conducting his second expedition, another explorer is active in Antarctica. Ernest Shackleton. Different mission, different region. The Ross Sea sector. Geographically separate. No direct overlap in location, but something in common. In Shackleton's reports, there are also observations that don't fully align with expectations. Anomalies. Noted carefully, documented, and then not pursued. No extended investigation. No major academic follow-up. Just logged and left. Now step back, because this is where the pattern forms. Different expeditions, different nations, different funding sources, different regions. Same behavior. Anomalies are observed, recorded precisely, and then nothing. No separation, no denial, just absence. No one picks it up. No one builds on it. No one challenges it publicly. The observation exists, but it doesn't move. And that kind of silence is different, because it doesn't look like censorship. It looks like restraint. It looks like professionals choosing not to push something further. Not because they're told not to, but because the cost of being wrong is higher than the reward of being right. Because if an observation threatens the framework that everything else depends on, it doesn't need to be erased. It just needs to be ignored. Now let's come back to Rothschild, because this part doesn't fit cleanly. Edmond de Rothschild defended Charcot's expedition. That's a fact. And again, wealthy patrons funding exploration wasn't unusual. But Rothschild's pattern of investment was not random. It was precise, purposeful. Agriculture, infrastructure, long-term projects with clear strategic value. He wasn't known for impulsive sponsorship. He funded things he understood, things he had reason to care about, which makes this strange, because Antarctica in 1903 had no obvious economic value. No agriculture, no infrastructure, no immediate return, just ice. So why fund it? Why place your name on an island in one of the most remote, inaccessible regions on Earth, at the exact moment when that region is being mapped for the first time with modern methods? And in the same geographic band where a centuries-old cartographic anomaly exists? Again, this could be coincidence. It could be prestige. It could be nothing more than timing. But when you place it alongside everything else, it doesn't sit as easily. Now here's where we need to be careful, because everything we've covered so far, redit et vili en absence, on what wasn't explained, what wasn't followed up, what wasn't resolved. And absence is weak evidence. It always is. You can always say there's nothing there. That gaps are normal. That science is incomplete. And that's true. But there's a detail that makes this harder to dismiss. When you map these anomalies geographically, they don't scatter. They cluster. They concentrate in a specific region. The Western Antarctic Peninsula, the island chains, the latitude that includes Rothschild Island. That's not what random gaps look like. Random gaps spread out. These don't. They align. And that alignment is what keeps this from being easily dismissed. Because now you're not looking at isolated questions. You're looking at a pattern with a location. A pattern that spans centuries. From a 1513 map to a 1908 expedition to mid-20th century analysis, all pointing to the same place. Now ask the simplest question. What would need to exist for all of this to make sense? Someone at some point would have had to map that coastline, not the ice, the land beneath it. That requires access, technology, time, organization. It requires being there before it was covered, or having a way to see through what covers it. And according to accepted history, no one had that. Not in 1513, not even close. So where did the data come from? That's the question no one answers. It's not dismissed. It's just not addressed. And then, for centuries later, a trained scientist arrives in that same region, observes something that doesn't match existing models, notes it carefully, and moves on. No explanation, no correction, just a sentence and silence. So what did he see? Did he recognize something? Did he understand it? Or did he simply note that something didn't fit and choose not to push further? Because that's the part we can't access. We have the records, but we don't have the interpretation. And maybe that's the point. Because the most durable form of silence isn't enforced. It's chosen. It's when people encounter something that doesn't align and decide, consciously or not, that it's safer to leave it where it is, logged, but untouched. Rothschild Island is still there. Nothing about it has changed. The name remains. The coordinates remain. The coastline remains. And whatever Charcot saw is still there too. Unexplained, unresolved, unexamined in any serious way. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a minor geological irregularity, a coincidence of shape, a misinterpretation amplified over time. That possibility has to stay on the table. But the alternative is harder to ignore. That the coastline was known long before it was supposed to be, that someone had access to information we don't have a framework for, and that when modern science brushed up against something that hinted at that, it didn't reject it, it didn't confirm it, it simply didn't follow it, because following it would lead somewhere that requires rewriting more than just a map. And that's where this stops. Not because there's an answer, but because the record ends. The island sits where it always has, at the edge of the map, in the same narrow band of coordinates, where questions have been asked, carefully noted, and then left alone, like a door, with no lock, no warning, no sign, that no one, at least officially, has ever tried to open again. But someone had to open it once. That's the part that remains. Someone knew where to go. Someone knew what to look for. And whatever they found was precise enough to be recorded, and quiet enough to disappear without ever being explained.